People are expecting to see Dr. Corsi's prescription for America right now. The doctor is traveling and will be joining us by Skype very soon. Of course, when you're out there traveling, it's tricky to stay on top of all this stuff. What we're going to be discussing is yesterday's hearing that took place in Washington, D.C. This was the latest hearing in Corsi v. Mueller, the civil case that Dr. Corsi has brought against Robert Mueller, the former special counsel in the Russiagate hoax investigation. People who've been following the show are well aware that Larry Klayman is representing Dr. Corsi in this matter. And we had the oral arguments in Washington, D.C. yesterday. I was in attendance in the courthouse there. I do want to remind everyone that they can support the doctor by watching Dr. Corsi's Prescription for America every week on Thursday at 5 p.m., normally on patreon.com/Jerome Corsi, patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, and subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth. It's extremely important, as I always remind everybody, to support the co-hosts that appear on Crowdsource the Truth, and Dr. Corsi really needs our support. He went in great detail yesterday about how he's been financially decimated, the various business opportunities that ended as a direct result. And here's the doctor now, so let's bring him in by Skype and see how he's doing. Dr. Corsi, how are you? Do we have you there?
Hi, Jason. I just got into a cab. I'm traveling all day today. Can you hear me?
I can hear you well, doctor. It's very good to see you. I know everyone is going to be pleased to see you there in the taxi. Hello, Dr. Corsi. How are you?
Undisclosed location traveling. I'm good.
Absolutely.
I'm doing fine.
Good to have
my
you
hair
with
is
us.
particularly cold, but that's the way it goes.
You don't look any
I've been
worse for
traveling
the
all
wear,
day.
doctor. Sorry?
Yesterday we were in Washington. We got back very late, and then I have been traveling again today.
Mm-hmm.
And thank you for attending the court appearance yesterday. I thought that was very good to have you there.
Yeah, well, it was interesting to observe, doctor, and we've said many times that you have exhibited just unbelievable bravery in the face of a behemoth that by every example is a crushing machine. Anytime an individual faces the government, the odds against you are daunting. And it occurred to me, doctor, being present in the courtroom yesterday, when you sue the U.S. government and you're in a United States federal court, it's a little bit of a stacked deck, isn't it?
Well, I mean, you certainly feel the power of the government. There's no doubt about it. I mean, it's a very formal setting. The federal district court in Washington is elegant. The judge is in complete command, total command. And Judge Huvel was, really in top form, and was a very brilliant woman, and for the layperson, I'm not trained as a lawyer. One of the hard things about legal processes is that they're not determined by common sense. They're determined by the nature of legal arguments. And, for instance, there are, in my claim against Mueller and the whole issue, there's a lot of, I'm claiming basically that they were trying to deprive First Amendment rights and deprive Fourth Amendment rights. And we sued Mueller personally as well as in his capacity as special counsel. So, I mean, the whole thing was a matter of really trying to identify whether or not we had the rights. The government that has sovereign immunity, you're not allowed to sue the government. But there are cases of exception where constitutional rights are denied. You can sue the government. And then there's the issue of whether you can sue Mueller personally, because he's not even, the Office of Special Counsel has been closed down. But it's the issue of, what is he responsible for the actions of the subordinates, the prosecutors? I never actually, encountered Mueller personally, but we dealt with his top prosecutorial staff. Aaron Zelinsky, Jeannie Rhee, and David Goldstein, who were three of the very top prosecutors under Weissman. And these are very technical questions. The judge questioned Larry Klayman, my attorney, was almost an hour and 45 minutes. And I would say a good hour and a half of that was questioning David. And you observed it. Um, I think you have to have similar feelings about it, Jason.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, Doctor, what I observed is that when Larry began, he was the first to speak. The judge was adversarial, and I say that because it is an adversarial process. It's not that the judge was being impolite or unprofessional, but she was very hard on Larry, definitely very adversarial, which should be expected of a judge. I felt when the defense team spoke, there was less of a sense of that happening, more of a cooperative sense, but that could be okay. As you commented to me after the proceeding, you never really know which direction these types of things are going to go in, and you can't make any kind of assessment based on how the judge acts or what the judge says. It could really go any way.
I've come to conclude that over the years, Jason. I mean, first of all, when the judge is acting professionally, and I've been to many court hearings, including circuit court hearings. This was a district judge, the trial level of the federal system. But a judge can often, when they're questioning the attorneys to try to decide how to make a ruling, sometimes they're very, very tough on one side. I mean, they come out almost aggressively, and if you judge their questions, you think for sure that side's going to lose.
Right.
But the judges may just be being aggressive because they want to test out their own thinking. They want to make sure they're not making a mistake in legal reasoning, or they want to test the lawyer to see if the lawyer has a good argument that counters what they may be thinking. Or, in other words, they're not showing their cards. They're not showing their hand, even when you try to assess from the nature of the questions they're asking where they're going. I mean, what I sensed was that, first of all, Judge Guvell is obviously a very brilliant person. I mean, she knows the law. She knew the case. She had prepared for this, and she was taking it very seriously. Now, it's a major case. It's one of the first times in this pushback, I've pushed back against the government. I think you find now even Giuliani is caught on to this, and Giuliani is saying that he wants to sue Schiff and others in Congress individually and, as Congress for what they're doing. Yeah. That's new technique, and I think Larry Klayman and I have really taken the lead on that, we're going to have to involve the judiciary to curb in some of these, I think, excessive prosecutorial misconduct.
Yeah.
It's got to be checked by the courts. I mean, when they gave me a plea deal, I refused to take it. Rudy Giuliani, I think, was correct saying that Mueller was basically telling me either go to prison the rest of your life or he's going to suborn perjury. Get me a script and get me to read that script. I knew it was a lie, but I had to tell that lie in front of a federal district judge and swear a plea deal that I had committed a crime I had not committed.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do it. I wouldn't swear before God or a judge.
Yeah.
But see, that's the denial of your First Amendment rights. I mean, and also I had a law license. I've got securities and insurance licenses, and I said if I plead before a federal judge, I become a felon, and I have to tell the regulatory authorities and financial services, both insurance and securities, that my status legally has changed. Well, Jeannie Rhee and Aaron Zelinsky said, well, because this is a secret plea deal, no one will know you're a felon, so you don't have to tell the regulators. Well, that's not how the laws are written.
Yeah.
I'm bound by the rules and regulations. I have an affirmative responsibility. The judge didn't like hearing that I was told that.
Right. Well, Doctor,
my wife thought it changed. My wife thought that at some point during the hearing, her mind began to open to some of the arguments that Larry was making.
Yeah.
I don't think Larry won all the points. I mean, I think there are still some issues at law that she was debating with Larry that she may view differently. Mm-hmm. But I think the case is a very sound case, and also the argument that the electronic surveillance, including on my stepson. All of this, I think, has a Fourth Amendment ramifications, and we're going to find out a lot more about this the next coming months.
Hmm.
At any rate, if there's two choices here, we're going to find out if the judge, the federal district judge, allows the court to be heard, the case to be heard. In other words, what the hearing was about was the government's motion to dismiss the case.
Right.
And so either she'll rule the case is totally dismissed, or the case is going to be heard, or the case is going to be dismissed in part and heard in part. And we will have to wait to get her decision.
Well, let me address a bit of that, Doctor, because I had asked Larry to join us, but he's traveling as well. And of course, I'm not a lawyer, but so people can understand what's happening. You've brought this civil case against Robert Mueller, both in his capacity as an agent of the U.S. government and in his personal capacity for violating your rights, suborning perjury, trying to trap you into lying. And as an aside, we should say that Jeannie Rhee, Aaron Zelinsky, etc., they're definitely not your friends, and them telling you that nobody's going to find out about whatever it is they're trying to convince you of I think you were very well advised to not follow what they said, because it seemed very much like a booby-trapped situation where they could have turned around and gotten you jammed up, as it were, had you taken their advice. So this civil case that you've brought against them is specifically about their attempts to violate your rights, and their motion to dismiss. This is critical because typically a court, and it depends on the jurisdiction, but typically they will not grant a motion to dismiss prior to the discovery process. If you've got a properly pled argument, if your complaint is valid cause of action to sue someone for, they allow you to go through the discovery process so that you can obtain the evidence that you would need to prove your case. Now, I detect that there is a strong sense on the part of the U.S. government that they do not want you to enter into a discovery process where you and Larry Klayman would be able to depose Robert Mueller and gain access to all kinds of files of his as his special counsel role, and they don't want that stuff coming out. So there's a strong impetus by the government to prevent that discovery process.
Well, that's exactly right. And I mean, clearly one of the issues that was there with the judge yesterday, Judge Hugel was saying, well, how do you know that, Dr. Corsi never saw Robert Mueller? That's correct, I never did. How do you know that, Jeannie Rhee and Aaron Zelinsky and David Goldstein were, in fact, acting under orders from Mueller? And what Larry said, I think, was his response to that was to the judge, you've got to assume that in any organization, the buck stops here under the head of the organization. And either the person was derelict in their responsibilities or knew what was going on and approved of the actions. Now, we're only going to know that if we obtain internal documents from the special counselor and understand what approvals they had to go through. But see, the point was, my case was critical. I mean, if I had sworn this plea and said I lied, they would have had a link to Assange, because they would have said, well, Dr. Corsi's lied that he didn't have a link to Assange. So we're going to assume that was the link to Assange that, that Stone used in order to collude with Assange, is to, also Stone being in touch with Donald Trump to figure out what, in fact, was the best use of, one of these emails on John Podesta in October 2016 should be released by Assange in order to do the most harm to Hillary Clinton. Well, none of that happened. And the basic decision I made was, even though they were saying they were going to charge me with obstruction of justice if I refused the plea deal, they were going to try to put me in prison for 25 years, which at my age would have been a death sentence. I would have been in prison the rest of my life. I could not, my faith is too strong. I couldn't imagine swearing on a Bible before a judge that I committed an offense I didn't do. I forgot a few emails the first day, but when they wrote this plea deal, the script that they wrote for me ignored the fact that they'd allowed me to amend the memory mistakes. I found those emails and said I forgot about these, and clearly they changed the testimony I gave the first day. But the plea deal was all about the first day's memory mistakes. I wouldn't do that. I just said, no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah.
Now, if I had done that, it would have broken the entire. That's all Mueller would have needed to have moved ahead on collusion. And I'm confident that that's why they spent 40 hours and 2 months browbeating me. They thought, they could break me, and I would eventually tell Mueller's prosecutors what they wanted to hear.
Right.
So, my case, that's why this book, Silent No More, and I'm not sure the judge had read Silent No More, but she seemed to have a command of what was going on. Are we doing okay on the connection yet?
Yes, everything's good, Doctor. Everything's good.
Okay. So, this was very important that I did not give in to them, but Giuliani is correct. All I had to do was read that script, and then they would have had, said no prison time. Otherwise, you run the risk that we're going to bring you to trial, and we're going to go for 25 years on conspiracy to obstruct justice, which is a much more serious offense than, forgetting a few emails and lying to the special counsel. I just said, well, I'm not pleading to a charge I didn't do, so you guys can take a hike.
Yeah.
They never indicted her. Now, what the judge is also understanding is that the key issue in the case was that pressure applied to me, an attempt to suborn perjury and an attempt to deny my First Amendment rights. Because at that point, that if I before a federal judge and pleaded guilty, I could never have published Silent No More. You never would have the story of what those 40 hours were like.
Right.
I would never have been able to write my new book, it's coup d'etat. I would have been silenced. I wouldn't be able to do this interview with you right now.
Mm.
And there's no reason. Look at General Flynn. They haven't sentenced him yet. They could have silenced me for 2 years.
Well, and not only that,
that's
Doctor,
the magnitude of this case.
It is, and this is what you're describing are truly devious tactics. This is the government. It's supposed to be by the people, for the people, and of the people, not against the people. And you are talking about a bunch of rogue prosecutors who are placed in a position of power that they have so grotesquely abused. And I would even go as far as saying that they've become so accustomed to this type of abuse of power that it's standard practice for them. We've heard many stories from people that have been, sort of forced into plea deals, or maybe not forced, but led down that path in a way that they're sort of left with no other good option, and it's a travesty of justice. So I think we really need to commend you, Dr. Corsi, because obviously you've been fighting for your life, but you're also fighting for justice, and you're fighting for what's right. Robert Mueller is a disgraceful individual, and he's been putting the president and the entire country through a really damaging waste of time, money, and just a witch hunt, as the president calls it.
Well, the entire premise of the case of Russian collusion was nonsense, and I knew that from the beginning. I had nothing to do with Russia. I had nothing to do with Assange. Their whole theory was predicated on the fact that in July and August, we took, 2016, I'd taken this vacation. It was my 25th wedding anniversary. We went to Italy, and I had time. I figured out that Assange had Vanessa's emails. I figured it out on my own. But the prosecutors told my attorney at that time, David Gray, that I was just so precisely right in what I figured out that they were sure I had to have a contact with Assange. They just couldn't figure out how I had the contact, whether I met somebody in Italy and it was wink wink and no electronic recording of it, or it just never happened. I didn't have any contact with Assange, and I did figure it out myself. That's why Silent No More, people have really got to read this book, and that's why I think my case here is precedent setting.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be a citizen saying to all the power of the federal government, all Mueller's special counsel, you cannot abuse me, you cannot abuse a citizen, force them into lying, browbeat them, put them through 40 hours of interrogation, play these perjury traps. I mean, stand up and everybody walk out of the room. You be interrogated in a room where Southeast Washington, where the FBI picks you up, they bring you in through the basement computer. You don't have a cell phone. There's no windows. There's no clock. You can't even go to the restroom without the FBI accompanying you to the restroom. And then they all stomp out, take your lawyer, and you sit there, with no communication for an hour or more, wondering what's going on in the next room. Yeah. It's absolutely absurd. And I want to cover one or two more points. My battery is going to be running out here. We're getting close, so I'm going to be wrapping up anyway.
Sure.
I thought the prosecution team that came yesterday was very poorly prepared. I thought it was like the B team, like
the defense.
Government
the defense, you
was
mean,
so
Doctor.
sure they had the upper hand. Pardon me?
The defense team defending the prosecutor.
Yeah, and I thought they were so poorly prepared, they couldn't answer the judge's questions. I think they just assumed that they were going to win because they're the government, and that they didn't need to prepare. They didn't need to send their A team. I mean, Larry actually, for an hour and let's say an hour and a half or an hour and 20 minutes, was one-on-one with the judge. The judge was very cordial to allow my wife to sit, in the plaintiff's desk with me. Mm-hmm. And I was greatly appreciative that she was there. She also felt that the judge started out very antagonistic, but over time, I think was beginning to understand that this was not going to be an easy case to dismiss.
Yeah.
If it is dismissed, it'll go to the Circuit Court of Appeals. I don't think a judge wants to be overturned on a case of this importance and magnitude.
Exactly. Doctor, one thing that I've observed...
I was astounded. And they wouldn't refer to me as Dr. Corsi. They kept saying Mr. Corsi.
Yes.
They were constantly... they didn't even know the law. I mean, the judge was asking them some very specific questions on Supreme Court cases, and they couldn't answer her.
Yeah.
I thought, it doesn't mean they lose the argument. There's not a debating contest. The judge is still going to settle it on the law.
Right.
But it was the arrogance of the government that they just could send in a very ill-prepared and unable to stand their own in the argument. The judge basically had to do a statement of the case to them. She said, "This, Dr. Corsi here did not lie." And she said twice, "I never lied." She understood that if I had lied, I would have been indicted.
Yeah.
They would have had me. I didn't lie.
Yeah. And
that they accused me of lying in order to pressure me into reading their script. And Giuliani said that's suborning perjury. And, the intense pressure on that. I mean, you look outside every morning and see, is the FBI going to raid your house at 5 a.m.? Are they going to come in and handcuff you and take you away? I mean, this is the problem. You live for months, the whole family disrupted, lost all my income, lost my consulting contracts, lost everything. Spending thousands of dollars on lawyers and saying, the only way you can ever see your grandchildren, if you have them, is, if you do what we say we do. Otherwise, we're going to put you in prison and throw away the key.
Yeah.
That type of power of the federal government to ruin a person's life when you've done nothing that's what this case is all about. And I did not get indicted because I had done nothing, and they had nothing. The only way I would have gone to prison if I was so afraid and intimidated that I read their plea deal in order not to have to face a trial. And then if I didn't behave or do exactly what they wanted, they would have owned me. Because as soon as I didn't do what they wanted, they could say, we're not going to say no prison time.
Yeah.
You didn't behave.
Everything you're describing, Doctor, is a not-so-subtle form of psychological torture that they have no problems engaging in to try to coerce you into doing what they want. And you actually just raised the point that I was going to raise. It was my observation that the defense team, Robert Mueller's defense team, kept calling you Mr. Corsi, which at first I was like, how could they be so incompetent that they don't even know the plaintiff's name and proper designation? But as the case went on, even if someone walked in there not knowing you at all, you were referred to throughout the proceeding as Dr. Corsi. So for them to call
even by the judge,
right.
by the judge.
So for them to not call you Dr. Corsi was a very clear attempt for them to subtly disparage you. And as I left the courthouse, they were leaving as well. And I asked them if they really didn't know the plaintiff's name or if they were trying to disrespect you. And when they refused to answer, Doctor, I turned on my trusty camera. And with your permission, I'd like to share this video with our audience right now. Is that all right?
I'll go right ahead, and if my battery runs out, it's just going to end on my part, so I may disappear on the screen at any moment.
Yes,
please do show that. Show it.
Yes, let's take a look at it. I'm going to run the video right now. Whoops, here we go.
You're defending Robert Mueller, and you kept referring to the plaintiff as Mr. Corsi. Is it because you don't know that he's a doctor, or you're intentionally disrespecting him? Can you answer the question, please? Should I presume everyone working for Robert Mueller is incompetent?
My questioning style is sometimes not so subtle, Doctor, but they just refused to answer, and I really think it was one of their tactics they were using to disparage you, so I don't appreciate them acting that way.
Well, they're betting on that, even though they didn't really present a very, they were terrible. I mean, they couldn't answer the judge's question. They weren't prepared. They were looking up the law at the table. They were confused.
Nervous.
And the arrogance is overwhelming. They just assume because they're the federal government, this is the federal district court, and they want to portray me as a, conspiracy theorist and all the rest of it. That I'm not going to be treated with respect, and they're going to throw me out on the street.
Right.
And I think that we've got a legitimate case here. These are issues that need to be adjudicated in that court. And I'm going to do everything we can to get them adjudicated. I thought Larry Klayman yesterday did a brilliant job. He was under a lot of pressure. He told the judge that, this is the swamp, and Robert Mueller, if she was going to rule, that Robert Mueller didn't see me in person, so we can't know what his role was.
Right.
He didn't personally interact with me. He said, this is what Washington does. It protects a certain class of people so that they can't be in any way held responsible in law for their behavior.
Yep.
And that's one of the key issues here at this trial, is whether this complaint, the lawsuit, is that I'm arguing that Robert Mueller still faces personal obligations for his behavior. Mm-hmm. If he wants to abuse his office, that's not going to be excused by the fact that he had an official duty.
Yeah. And I'll tell you this, Doctor, I've observed Larry in court in several different cases now, and in addition to being just such a good friend and fun guy to talk to and everything, in court he is an absolute genius. It's literally like watching Wayne Gretzky or Michael Jordan or something like that, because when the judge began asking those questions about you never having spoken to Robert Mueller or confirmed that these orders had come from Robert Mueller, Larry did not back down from that. He didn't fall for that. He basically pointed out to the judge that her argument would equate to the guy who's in charge of the $30 to $40 million investigation having no idea what's going on, and basically the lunatics running the asylum.
Yeah, I mean, so the troops go out and they commit a massacre, and the general wasn't there at the massacre.
Right.
Does that mean the general's absolved from responsibility? I mean, if you're in charge, you have responsibility for the behavior of the subordinates, and you've got to assume that they're acting under your orders, or you were not negligent in giving orders, specifically making sure they behaved. Yeah. And it's no good to write a memo saying do everything by the book like Susan Rice did when they violated a dozen laws. The point too, Joe, is if you took a look, Jason, you saw the preparation book. Larry had a book there, 7-8 inches thick, with all the legal research that he had done to prepare for that argument.
Yeah. And
the fact is that in that 1 hour and 40 minutes you get with the judge, that's been Larry's entire legal education, his entire experience in all the court cases he's dealt with. Mm-hmm. He's been before that judge before. He reminded the judge of her own cases. The judge even said, we don't want any more about this town and arguing about the corruption. Okay, thank you for your compliments, but I don't need any more compliments. I mean, I thought the judge actually was kind of bantering with Larry. And
Oh,
my
absolutely.
experience, Monica and I came into the courtroom. We were very respectful. We watched the case that was proceeding before us very attentively. We sat at the desk. We didn't say a word. We are not allowed in that court setting. The attorneys are supposed to do the talking. We were very respectful to the judge, I believe, and her position commands respect. It's like in the military. I mean, I thought the judge, quite frankly, asked good questions and was um, evidence really taking the case seriously.
Yeah.
I was actually quite impressed with her. I mean, we may still yet object with her decision, and we may get an appeal if it's not favorable. But I can't say that I didn't feel any hostility towards the judge. I actually quite admired how she handled herself.
Yeah. There's one other thing I observed, Doctor. People who are regular viewers of Crowdsource the Truth or CorsiNation.com or FreedomWatchUSA.org are well aware that Larry Klayman has participated in a number of these national security trials and various legal actions that he's brought directly related to illegal surveillance of United States citizens. And when Larry referred to some of those cases and referenced this concept of overseas phone call data collection, it seemed like the defense team and even the judge to some extent were unaware of that or acted like it was a fairy tale we were talking about, and they seemed surprised by the notion that phone calls would be intercepted.
Well, I think the judge will go back and research some of those cases, and Larry has played an historic role. I mean, Larry doesn't get the credit. I mean, Snowden and others, Assange, Montgomery, Binney, you can list a whole list of people who brought the American public's awareness to the fact that the surveillance we're under already is massive. The government say everything. This conversation right here will be recorded.
Yeah.
Everything is being recorded. The government has the ability to record every conversation in America that in any way appears electronically. And with this face recognition technology, they're going to be able to record, from birth to death where you've been in person and in public. And that data is all stored. It can be replayed at any time. The capacity is massive, and the violations are massive. Now, Larry's played an historic role in bringing this to the public attention, every bit as much as Snowden and others. And I think my case also raises these issues. And we're going to start finding out more when the Horowitz report comes out on FISA abuse, when we see how the FISA court was abused, when we see how the government made up the Steele dossier and yet was doing massive electronic surveillance. Larry made the point several times. They had to know I didn't have any contact with Assange, yet they tried to push the point to get me to admit something they knew was not true. Government, Mueller. And kind of finally here, now I'm going to have to sign off, but finally I want to make the point that when we get the Barr report, when we get all these reports out, and the Ukraine gate, as I'm doing in my daily decodes of news, which I've resumed again on CorsiNation.com and on my YouTube channel and Patreon channel. And please give out all the links for those, Justin.
Absolutely.
I'm making it clear that Ukraine Gate is a repeat of Russia Gate, and it's going to fail. It's going to backfire against the Democrats. And thanks, Jason. I'm glad. I'm going to have to really sign off now. But
no problem.
Thank you. I'm glad we got in here, and I'm glad to get together. Please give all the links and references. I probably won't be able to do the news decode on Monday. I won't be able to do it tomorrow, but by Tuesday I'll be resuming it again. But I had this trip scheduled, and it was impossible to cancel it. So
no
I
problem.
hope everybody understands that and bears with me, okay?
And even after you leave us on this phone call, Doctor, I've got another video from outside the courthouse. So we've got over 600 people viewing right now. They'll stay with me as I finish the broadcast. And have a safe trip, Dr. Corsi. We wish you the best there, and we'll see you back next week at our regular time on Dr. Corsi's Prescription for America. This has been a special presentation where we're bringing you information directly from Corsi v. Mueller, the oral arguments hearing that took place in Washington, D.C. yesterday. And as the doctor said, I want to remind everyone that they can follow Dr. Corsi and his news decodes every day. Well, when he's not traveling, but they can follow Dr. Corsi on CorsiNation.com. You can also sponsor the doctor through the various payment links that he has there, and he really needs our support more than ever. This is going to be the fight of his life against Robert Mueller and the United States government. This is really troubling corruption. I hope that people will also go to patreon.com/Jerome Corsi and sponsor the doctor's Patreon page. Please sponsor Crowdsource the Truth as well. You can go to patreon.com/Crowdsource the Truth and become a sponsor if you aren't already. I can't do these broadcasts without the support of the audience, so I really appreciate everyone who is a sponsor. And if you're watching and not a sponsor, please consider going over to patreon.com/Crowdsource the Truth and becoming a sponsor. I want to share with everyone this video that we recorded right outside the courthouse yesterday, just after the hearing ended. This is the doctor's lawyer, Larry Klayman, and Mrs. Corsi, and let's just play that for everybody so you can hear the doctor's statements.
Larry Klayman, you know me as such. I'm the lawyer of Dr. Jerome Corsi, very proud to have him as my client. His wife, Monica Corsi, we were in court.
Whoop. Sorry, everybody.
It's the only one.
Trying to get that audio delay resolved. My fault, I apologize. Let's see if this is going to do us any good here. Okay, sorry. Played it once again.
Larry Klayman, you know me as such. I'm the lawyer of Dr. Jerome Corsi, very proud to have him as my client. His wife, Monica Corsi, we were in court today over the case that Dr. Corsi brought against Robert Mueller. He's the only one who ever pushed back against Robert Mueller with regard to all of Mueller's alleged illegal activities, whether it was grand jury leaks, they're supposed to be kept secret, whether it's illegal mass surveillance, intercepting his telephone messages, emails, text messages, using it against him, or whether it was First and Fourth Amendment violations, illegal surveillance, and trying to quell and chill his First Amendment rights. As you know, Dr. Corsi was threatened with prosecution, with having to plead out to one count of perjury, which would have been a life sentence given his age, if he did not lie and implicate the president in crimes. We were in court today over a motion to dismiss brought by the government, so-called government, and Robert Mueller, and we appeared before the Honorable Helen Siegel-Uvel, and we were impressed with the fact that the judge was up to date. She had read all of the pleadings. She gave us an opportunity to make all of our arguments, mainly that Special Counsel Robert Mueller is not immune from prosecution, that he himself is responsible, he must be held accountable for hundreds of millions of dollars in damages, that the Office of Special Counsel must be enjoined from further grand jury leaks. We're going into a very volatile period with impeachment and everything else that's going on here in this city. And I made the argument that it was time that someone in the federal judiciary held one of these elite establishment politicians, former FBI directors, special counsels, accountable to the rule of law. Now, the judge pressed me on a number of issues, but I was gratified that she was up to date, that she had read the cases, and I had commended her at the end of the hearing, saying that there are many judges in this courthouse that won't even give you the opportunity to appear in front of them in oral argument because they stay in their chambers. They're too afraid of these hot button political issues. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Corsi for his observations of what went on, but we're hopeful that we'll get a good decision from the judge. She listened to us, and hopefully we'll get one soon.
And I think I want to second what Larry said. First of all, I'm very pleased we had the hearing. The judge could have simply ruled on the motion to dismiss and never had a chance to hear the arguments. I thought she was exceptionally well prepared. She's given this a lot of thought. From the experience I've had even reporting on courts, you can't tell what a judge is going to do by the questions they ask. Sometimes judges are just pressing to find out, what the response to something would be. It doesn't mean they're going in a particular direction. I was just very impressed with how, in detail, this judge had command the law and the facts, and the seriousness with which she was taking the case. We were over there. The hearing started at 2:30, and it didn't get over until after 4 o'clock. It was almost 2 full hours of questioning by the judge, and it was impressive to see the amount of care and attention she's taking. So I think, Monica, we're both grateful for that.
We're very grateful. Thank you very much. And I also want to thank the judge for letting me sit next to my husband and give him support.
Yeah, the judge was exceptionally very to the point. And, you know, very smart, highly intelligent judge, and very hopeful that she'll see that we can proceed with this case. So I think Larry did a great job. I mean, it got combative at different points between, you know, discussions of the law and very technical.
So thank you, Larry.
But Larry did a great job, and I will too, Larry. Thank you very much.
I've ordered a copy of the transcript. We'll make that publicly available so people can read it.
And thank you, Jason, for coming and covering this. We really appreciate you being here in person, and should be very interesting. I'm looking forward to our next broadcast together, which we'll do on your Patreon show and mine. They've gotten great response so far, and I think we're beginning to build. I'm beginning to do these daily news decodes on CorsiNation.com. Of course, today we couldn't do one, but
we'll put this on.
Yeah, we'll put this on. But I think we're also, you know, getting back at it. I'm, you know, recovering now from all that we went through as a family, and it's been a very traumatic year. And let's just end on a hopeful note, saying I've really come out of this thinking that the judge will allow us to go forward. I think we have a serious case here, and I like the opportunity to have it heard. So thank you very much.
I want to commend Jason too, because, you know, here we have one of the most material witnesses in the entire Russian witch hunt collusion investigation. And Jason was one of the few media that showed up today. They're now all preoccupied on this new witch hunt to impeach the President of the United States. But this is still a relevant issue. It's still out there. And certainly the characters on Capitol Hill, Gerald Nadler, head of the Judiciary Committee, Adam Schiff, others are still dealing with what they hope to make out of the so-called Russian collusion and obstruction of justice allegations. So what Dr. Corsi did today was not just to stand in the breach for himself, but for the President. I hope the President recognizes that. He did make reference to Dr. Corsi in the past, but the President should be very thankful to Dr. Corsi. And we also note today that Rudy Giuliani, the President's lawyer, is talking about doing something that Corsi did over a year ago, that is push back. Because if you don't push back against these people, they'll run you over. So we're very thankful for the judge for giving us an opportunity to be heard.
Yeah, they destroy the family.
They destroy good families for nothing.
It's interesting. I think the press was very interested when they thought that, you know, me, a strong Donald Trump supporter, was going to go to prison. They were all over that. They had lots of press coverage. We had microphones out here standing right in this spot. And when now it's clear that I'm not going to be indicted, that the Mueller case ended and I rejected their plea deal and they did nothing, which is pretty much the crux of what this complaint is all about. The press isn't interested because they can't go after President Trump. I think President Trump has suffered enormously. We've been through a lot, but by no means what President Trump has been through. And I continue to admire his courage and his dedication to the nation, his dedication to the Constitution. He's willing to take all this abuse. I mean, Donald Trump didn't need this. He had the life of a millionaire or billionaire and luxurious settings, and he's now subjecting himself to all this abuse because of his, I think, fundamental affection for and patriotism for the United States of America. So I want to say thank you, President Trump, for all you've done for us.
And at the end, God always wins.
In the end, God always wins.
Thank you.
And there we go. That was the statements given by Dr. Corsi and Larry Klayman and Mrs. Corsi outside the courthouse yesterday. I want to thank everyone for watching this special presentation being brought to you today in lieu of the normal broadcast of Dr. Corsi's Prescription for America. I wanted to make sure everyone got a chance to see Dr. Corsi's reaction to the oral arguments in Corsi v. Mueller at the hearing yesterday in Washington, D.C. This is truly a historic historic lawsuit because it's sending a message to goons like Robert Mueller and other people in the DOJ who are much younger, Aaron Zelinsky, Jeannie Reed. This is not the way the Department of Justice can work. The United States government is intended to be run by the people, for the people, and of the people, not an elite class that intimidates us or Americans like Dr. Corsi, basically destroying him financially, putting his family under unbelievable pressure. There was a whole sequence of questions having to do with Dr. Corsi's stepson and how the FBI located him if they weren't monitoring his communications. It's an interesting case to observe. I want to thank all of our generous Patreon sponsors who are joining us each week at 5 p.m. Eastern for Dr. Corsi's Prescription for America. And I want to remind everyone we've got a great presentation of the intelligence assessment with Kevin Shipp coming up at 7 p.m. tonight. So if you're not already a Patreon sponsor, get on there to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth and subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth. It's a great way to support the independent journalism that's brought to you each day by Crowdsource the Truth, and also to access tons of really exciting exclusive content that you can only get there. There's a huge library of information there. People can also support Dr. Corsi by going to CorsiNation.com or logging on to patreon.com/Jerome Corsi. That's Dr. Corsi's Patreon page, and both of those are great ways to support the doctor. So join me again in just a little while for that episode of the Intelligence Assessment. Thanks everybody for watching.